How to create a beloved life. O Lord, God, what is karma? Past, present, future actions, and visarga, karma, the action that creates and destroys beings, is karma. The emergence of the world happens through actions, and its destruction also occurs through actions, which actions are considered effective. The actions that cause a person to stand here and the actions that stop them from coming here are absorbed into the supreme divine power. They are all actions. Nothing happens without actions. They are all actions. Nothing happens without actions. The effort made to elevate the life of all beings is called karma. The efforts made to elevate the life of beings to a higher, more magnificent level are called karma. In Sanskrit, the word visarga means to perform a sacrifice, to give charity, to offer, and to let go. It refers to the sacrifice made for the elevation of all beings, meaning the world and myself, my sacrifice and charity. If these actions of offering are for my development, then there's no hindrance in calling them karma. The actions performed for the purpose of elevation are what the Gita refers to as karma. If these actions are for my development, there's no issue in calling them karma. The actions performed to elevate are what the Gita refers to as karma. Give up everything, like the mind, intellect, senses, and even the ego. The action performed for the purpose of elevation is what the Gita refers to as karma. To give up everything means to give up the mind, intellect, senses, and ultimately even the ego. Start with general development. In the end, it can be said that one becomes absorbed in God only by letting go of the ego. What is exactly meant by adhidaiva and precisely adhibhuta? All perishable things are overpowered. All created things are adhibhuta. They are perishable. Whatever is born will perish. That's why we don't believe that God was created. If we believe in the creation of God, then according to the principles of justice, we must also accept their destruction. Therefore, God is unconditioned and uncreated. The color, form, and shape of the body change, but the desires grasped by unconsciousness and intellect remain the same. Adhidaiva and adhibhuta are both different. The soul the two aspects. One is the object to be understood, and the other is the one who explains. These are the two divisions. The object of knowledge and understanding, that is the lower nature, which is perishable, is called the material world. And the knowing aspect, which is the higher nature, is referred to as the soul. That is the supreme deity. In this body, there is a great sacrifice happening, which is called God's sacrifice. In each one, there is a sacrifice happening. In this way, 100-fold sacrifice is taking place. In this body, the one who is conducting the sacrificial actions is God. The service of God that is happening quietly, without any noise, is called a sacrifice. The supreme sacrifice means actions performed without any noise. What is the end of life? Or what is the end of time? Daily death, transitional death, death due to ignorance, and physical death. There are 4 types of death. Daily death means sleep. In this, everything is left behind. In sleep, knowledge, wealth, bungalow, wife, children, position, and prestige. Nothing remains. We were dead for such a long time, but now we are all here, having woken up at 6 in the morning. Transitional death refers to the stages of childhood, youth, and old age. The third is death due to ignorance, and the fourth is physical death. In scholarly language, these are referred to as momentary death, daily death, transitional death, death due to ignorance, and physical death. In each of these stages, one should remember God. That's why our ancestors encouraged us to take the name of God while sleeping. How will the remembrance of God happen at the time of death for someone who constantly meditates on Him? And what will that form be? One who constantly and uninterruptedly meditates on God is the one who truly focuses on Him. That's why in the Gita, God tells Arjuna to constantly meditate on Him and also to fight, meaning to take action. By dedicating your mind and intellect to me, you will undoubtedly attain me. This is what God tells Arjuna in the Gita. At the time of death, a person remembers their most beloved object. What will happen to my children one who is concerned about this even at the moment of death. One Adi says to keep this in mind, but if we have God as our beloved, you will remember them in the end. Now the question arises, how do we make God the center of our lives? If my wife is the center of my life, then that's great. She has been sent to me by my God. One should think and say, God, you have given me such a beautiful and virtuous wife. How much God love do you have for me? A beautiful and virtuous wife is a gift from God. It should feel like a love letter. Behind the wife, one should see the presence of God. Then she will no longer just be a wife, but will become a means for our growth and our love for the divine power will increase. This is how we make God the center of our lives. Continuously. There is no prohibition on remembering God while doing any work. On the contrary, we must take action. If we abandon our responsibilities, it would be escapism. Therefore, we need a life that makes God a great center for me. If we abandon our responsibilities, reflect on God daily. Therefore, we need a life that makes God a great center for me. To make the great God the center of our lives, we should reflect on Him. But how do we reflect? One should remember the qualities of God, all-knowing, eternal, the ruler of all, subtle beyond the subtlest, the sustainer and nourisher of all, inconceivable, radiant like the sun, and pure beyond ignorance. We should reflect on these aspects of God. One should reflect on this aspect of God and remember His qualities of knowledge. Knowledge means omniscience. God is all-knowing. This perspective should be maintained, and we should remember Him. If we understand God as all-knowing, then our asking and crying will seem pointless. Whatever we ask and cry for before God, both will seem futile. There is no need to ask Him, because what is in my best interest? God knows what I need and what I should do. Just considering God as all-knowing in a verbal sense won't be enough. If I consider God to be all-knowing, then I shouldn't have to suffer in front of Him. This is very difficult. We keep asking God for things. Give this, give that, and our demands keep piling up. Even if one desire is fulfilled, another one rises up. But God knows how much I can handle. He's all-knowing. If we reflect on God with this perspective in life and consider Him as the ultimate center, then at the end of our life, there will be a remembrance of God. The love of God should come to mind first, and our focus on Him should be for the development of life. When we look towards Narayan, the first thing that comes to our mind is Lakshmi. God's omniscience is not just about intelligence. If we think that God is omniscient, I too must strive for omniscience. Strive for knowledge to understand life. If we think this way, one thing will be certain. Just as God is omniscient, I too must strive to be omniscient. We need to understand the meaning of life by acquiring knowledge. Who becomes wise? A wise person is one whose perspective on life is knowledgeable. For a wise person, life is both beautiful and dutiful. When looking towards God, life seems beautiful. And when looking towards creation, life seems to be about duty. Life is beauty. God observes mind and intellect. When we look at God, it seems that life is beauty. And when we look at the creation, it seems that life is duty. And the senses perform actions. The truth is indeed true. But what drives them, how the mind and intellect are, is what God observes. God observes the purpose behind actions. The one who has envisioned this feels that God is omniscient, a visionary of revolution, far-sighted, and someone who sees beyond the senses. He resolves to discipline himself and act according to God's will, empowered by God. He feels that he will discipline his mind, intellect, and senses and continue to act while staying in accordance with God's commands. He also feels that it is for this purpose that God has given him strength. God is even more subtle than an atom. God can become the smallest of the small. The God who sustains the moon, the sun, the planetary system, and countless living beings is the same God who sits idly smoking a bidi even next to a beggar. It's truly the wonder of God. What could be smaller than this? Those who consider themselves great and important should remember this aspect of God. One should be able to become the smallest of the small. God is subtler than the subtlest, extremely subtle, the most subtle, which means He is all-encompassing. God enjoys subtlety. It pleases Him. The reason is that His own form is subtle. God enjoys subtlety. He finds it pleasing. His form is subtle. So, what you have is the subtlest. Whatever is there, the most subtle thing, dedicate that to God. From the perspective of the divine, the mind is subtle. The intellect is subtler than the mind. Dedicate that to God. The ego is even subtler than the intellect. Dedicate that to God. The more subtle we give, the more our life will develop. The incomprehensible form of God sustains and nurtures everyone. When I realize that my body is also controlled by God, the ego of this is mine fades away. It should go on. Life is for development. I earn, I provide for my family, believing that my wife and my son belong to me is ego. Those who have let go of the idea of mine in their lives are very advanced individuals. We should help others develop. We should aid others' growth. As God sustains all, we should also take responsibility. Just as we use others for our own development, we should also be of use in the development of others' lives. Since God has taken on the responsibility of sustaining everyone, humans should also feel the need to take on some responsibility. The state of indulgence is different, and a person who takes on responsibility is different. Since God has taken on the responsibility of sustaining everyone, humans should also feel the need to take on some responsibility. The state of indulgence is different, and a person who takes on responsibility is different. Animals living in a state of indulgence are not ready to take on any kind of responsibility. They are only ready to indulge in pleasures, and when a human becomes like an animal, as Mr. Vector has written, when a human becomes like an animal among all living beings, the human is the worst and becomes their own cruelest enemy. It's as if this creature lives life according to the mantra of eat, drink, and enjoy. The power that has illuminated my life, the one that drives it. I have some responsibility and duty towards that. Among all living beings, the human is the worst, the cruelest, and becomes his own worst enemy. This creature lives life according to the mantra of eat, drink, and enjoy. The power that has illuminated my life, the one that drives it, I have some responsibility and duty towards that. This ideology should be accepted by every human. The power that has illuminated my life, the one that drives it, I have some responsibility and duty towards that. Every human should accept this ideology. In this way, indeed, make your life dear to the Lord. One can enjoy or intellectual and mental pleasure. Hail,